Purdue eked out a win on Wednesday night in Evanston, Illinois. A house of horrors. It has been for Purdue recently in recent years. Purdue does manage to pull out the win 70-66, starting with the game's hero, the guy that kind of saved this team's vibes for the season, CJ Cox. KenPom MVP, 27 points, 5 for 5 from 2 point range, 5 for 8 from three. He had three massive offensive rebounds, three assists to zero turnovers as well. A plus CJ game, A plus CJ game, probably like just an utterly ridiculous performance from him. What did you see from CJ Cox night? What did you see from Purdue or on Wednesday night?
Wednesday night, yeah, CJ Cox ruining Nick Martinelli's senior night. This was 28 minutes, so we're finally getting some, close to 30, and it took 27 points on 13 shots for Painter to play CJ Cox 19 minutes and rotate him out at every opportunity. But hey, when you're knocking down shots at that clip, 5 for 5 from inside the arc, by the way, got into his mid range a little bit, 5 for 8 from three. Both was free throws, no turnovers. Again, he's been incredible at taking care of the ball in conference play in particular. Yeah, this was A plus CJ game. He whenever he was on Jaden Reed, where the Jaden Reed minutes where he would dribble the ball off his leg or whip a pass to nobody in the corner, and whenever anyone else was on Jaden Reed, it's when he'd look like a prime NBA, Russell Westbrook cutting to the basket. But I thought this was a fantastic game from CJ offense and defense.
Yeah, I think we're quickly moving into territory where this Purdue team now has five guys that are like a clear best five, and it's the five starters. And at this point, I think CJ, much like Clough has for large points of this parts of the season, is demanding 30 minutes a game. Like at this point, it needs to just be CJ Cox playing 30 plus minutes per game. I don't think there's any reason for him to not be. I don't think there's basketball reasoning. I think he's clearly the third best guard. I think he clearly fits next to Braden and Fletcher. I think he's the clear best perimeter defender on this team. I think with I think arguably kind of interchangeably with Omer, he's this team's most consistent shooter outside of Braden and Fletcher. And so I think at this point, it's just we're to a point CJ needs 30 minutes. And I think you'll see more games like this just because he's such a threat. I mean, he's a true three-level scorer. I think of all the Carson Edwards comps that have gotten thrown around, he's the closest archetype wise to Carson we've seen since him. He's this undersized flamethrower off the dribble scorer. I'm not saying he's as good as Carson yet, but who knows? He may end up being that guy in 2 years. And a night like tonight not only makes you feel good going forward about CJ Cox, but about next year too, with CJ Cox kind of stepping into a more primary scoring role.
I mean, look, if you go 10 for 13 from the floor against a Power Five team, I mean, I know it's Northwestern, but it's not like he's doing this against sub 300 Compom teams. This is a top 100 squad, and he was the best player on the floor. Yeah, you mentioned clear third best guard in this team. You and I have been kind of on the same page about wanting more CJ Cox minutes all season. Like every time Purdue's needed someone to step up when vibes are at their lowest, CJ is like the guy outside the big three to do that. And he came through in a big way in this game. I mean, 27 points on 13 shots is just absurd. Like that's just crazy. That's over 2 points per shot he takes. And yeah, you mentioned the 3 rebounds, 3 assists as well, impacting the game in more ways than one. And more ways than one. Trey Kaufman-Renn probably Purdue's second best player. Another great Trey game. 11 points on 9 shots, 10 rebounds, 2 assists. Did have 4 turnovers, as did Braden Smith. We'll talk about Braden here in a sec. But outside of the turnovers, which mostly came early in the game when Purdue was really trying to force the ball down low, and Northwestern's was very quickly swarming Trey, and he wasn't quite as sharp about passing out of those traps as he usually is. But what you see from Trey this one? Another double double. He's really kind of been on a heater
Yeah.
lately.
I mean, second half senior year Trey is by far the best version of Trey we've seen. And I mean, it feels like obviously that should be the case, but it didn't seem like that would be the case when he averaged 20 and 6 last year and then kind of took a dip in the first part of this year. But at this point in the season, he's become such a steady, automatic, productive presence at this point that like I need to look, but like he's starting to feel like he's automatically going to grab 8 rebounds, like and he's
13 and
becoming a
9.
double double threat every night. Like even the last game against Ohio State, he didn't have a double double, but he had 19 and 9. Yeah, he had 10 and 6 and 7 against Michigan State, which is just it's just he's starting to impact the game in every facet. He's become like the best of this is the best defensive version of Trey I've seen like in his entire career as well. And so he's just become I don't want to say glue guy because he's so much more important to this team than that, but he's just become this hyper realized version of a glue guy where it's like he does all these glue guy things while also having the ability to just go get 25.
Yeah, you mentioned the consistency. So starting with the Maryland game on February 1st. So since February 1st, here are Trey's box score numbers. He went for 7, 10, and 4 with a block against Maryland. He had 12, 8, 4 against Oregon. He had 6, 19, and 2, if you remember that crazy Nebraska game. He had 12 and 12 against Iowa, 27 and 12 against Michigan, 26 and 5 against Indiana, 10, 6 and 7 against Michigan State with a block, 19 and 9 against Ohio State, 11, 10 and 2 against Northwestern. That's incredible. Like that's the level that we need Trey Coffin-Wren to be playing at. And Purdue has lost some games in that stretch for sure. They're 2 of 5 in their last 5, but I think Trey stepping up his game and kind of marrying the scoring prowess we saw last year with the insane rebounding production we saw at the beginning of this year into more of a fully realized version of himself is exactly what this team needs. And that's, fluctuated what his role is going to be game to game, even, right? He had 6 points and 19 rebounds against Nebraska, and then he had 20 points and 6 rebounds against Indiana. So it's not always going to look exactly this. But on the whole, he's a pretty safe bet for 12 and 9, at minimum. And there's going to be games where if defenses are really crashing in the paint, he might be more of a rebounder and a playmaker. And there's going to be games where they're playing one-on-one and trying to take away shots from Purdue's guards, and he's going to have to go get 20. And the ability to kind of adjust and adapt throughout these, the last month, to 6 weeks have really shown me that, like, in March, depending on the matchup, we could see, in the Sweet 16, Trey goes, for like 25 and 10 against, like a 3 seed. And then in the Elite Eight, maybe he's not scoring as much, but he's grabbing 15 rebounds. And that sort of versatility is big for this team, I think.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think Trey has just become so solid in everything he's done, and in that stretch, even the games that Purdue has lost, it's been more about everyone around Trey other than himself. Like you look at that Michigan game, and it's like, yeah, Purdue loses that Michigan game and is at arm's length the entire time. Trey had what 27 and 12 in that game. Like he was phenomenal and was the best player, earned a Ken Palm MVP in a loss type performance from him. So
Double
it's
digit loss, by the way. That's hard to do.
right. And so, like, even when this team has underperformed, Trey has shown up. And I think that's been huge for this team. And, the more guys I think that you just keep stacking good performances, the better you feel. And obviously that sounds easy to say, but this team has dealt with a lot of inconsistency, I think. Like it's as much as you have the ability to have kind of one guy show up in any given game, for large stretches of the season, different guys have disappeared for certain games, even the stars, even guys like Trey, guys like Braden, guys like Fletcher. They've just had performances where they're just not really a factor. And I think getting to a point where now you have Trey and you have CJ starting to stack these games that are just constantly really productive, really solid performances. You start to get Braden back into that mix as well. All of a sudden, you feel really good about this team again come tournament time. And I think that's really important for this team, just confidence wise, being able to stack several good performances in a row, because this is a team that think really leans on the vibes and the mentals of this group to kind of perform well. And so getting those vibes back up with a bunch of good performances in a row is important.
Yeah, and let's kind of talk about some of the complementary pieces in this performance. Oscar Clough, after a rough go of it against Ohio State, played 30 minutes, had 9, 7, and 3 with a steal and a block. That steal was a valiant coast to coast effort that didn't quite work out the way he hoped, but he's now 1 for 3 on finishing those this season. So It's good to see him trying. Fletcher Lawyer, 10 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 turnovers, a steal. Very, very Fletcher stat line there. Braden Smith played all 40 minutes, 7 points, only made 1 field goal, 3 rebounds, 9 assists, 4 turnovers. I mentioned, kind of alluded to this earlier in the game. I think I told you offline this is one of the worst Braden games I've seen, maybe since his freshman year. What was your takeaway for this performance?
Yeah, this was the Houston defense executed against a not A plus Braden, I think. I think A plus Braden just tears that double team apart, but B plus Braden just kind of dribbles out and makes the right play. And I think for large stretches of this game, there was a want from Purdue fans for Braden to be more aggressive, and Northwestern just made that impossible. I mean, you just send two at Braden every anytime he touches the ball, and you bring another guy up by Trey Kaufman-Renn, and it makes it really really difficult on Braden to do anything other than make the easy pass. Especially, I think in a game where you started out making so many committing so many turnovers off of crazy passes, and that wasn't all Braden. A lot of that was like Trey and Oscar trying to throw over the head post passes, but that wasn't exactly a time for Braden to get super loose with the ball and try a bunch of crazy cross court overhead passes, I think. And he did a good job of kind of settling down and making the right play. He had the weird turnover late where he dribbled it off of his leg and then threw it back and saved it, and then it ended up with the Northwestern layup. But uh, other than that, I think he took care of the ball fairly well against the defense that was just kind of trying to force the ball out of his hands, and was just really well executed, I think, defensively.
Every time we critique Braden's performance, we have to have the disclaimer of like he had 7, 3, and 9, and we're calling this one of the worst games of his career. Isn't that crazy? It's not so much the stat line. He looked completely checked out,
Yeah.
and he played 40 minutes. He did not look like he wanted to be out there playing basketball for one of them, and I've never thought I'd say that about Braden Smith. And he was just kind of going through the motions. It was a very lazy game. The most energized he looked was when he was trying to save passes that he dribbled out of bounds and throw them back into the Northwestern defense for easy runouts. Did that twice in this game, including in the last 2 minutes. It almost cost Purdue the game. Uh, this team needs to get to March, man. I mean, the tournament, we're in March now, but they need to get to the meaningful games again. Uh, Again, there's another comment that I told you offline. We should really record those comments because they're good. Good dialogue. But I think this team is going to look a lot better when they actually care about the games again. And this is not meant to be like a defense of these lazy performances. These are the last games these seniors, especially, are going to be playing for Purdue. And you hope they care more about them. Hopefully, they give the fans a good performance on senior night against Wisconsin, which we'll preview here in a second. But um, overall, it just these guys, I think, are checked out of the grind of the Big Ten season once they lost the Michigan game. And I think, other than trying to get up for a Michigan State game that all the players have talked about how much that meant to them kind of for the last year, since Michigan State really punked them last year. Other than that game, they're just, yeah, it's Ohio State. Who cares? Yeah, it's Northwestern. Like, oh, cool, we won in Welsh Ryan. Haven't done that before. All right. Like they're just, other than Trey, who really seems to lay it all on the line, and CJ Cox, who, either earned himself a first option role in Purdue or somewhere else next year with that performance. Um, these guys just aren't playing as hard as you'd like to see, which is, again, not meant to be a defense or an excuse necessarily, but just to kind of point out, like, this is not the Purdue we're going to see when the NCAA tournament comes. And, if Purdue loses in a Sweet 16 game against a team they maybe wouldn't have faced if they had a higher seed, are going to come back to some of these games and some of these performances and be like, hey, like, it's all well and good to say, we'll fix it when we get into the tournament, but that attitude also sometimes puts you in tough spots.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think this team could use some important games. It'll be interesting to see how they respond on senior night. What should be a very very important game against what should be an undermanned Badgers team. So on that note, why don't we hop into previewing this game? This is a Wisconsin team that Purdue has already seen before. So if you're interested in more kind of personnel player by player breakdowns this Wisconsin team, feel free to check that out. But on that note, this Wisconsin team did lose to Purdue by 16 back in January. Purdue came into into Madison and kind of punked Wisconsin before they hit full stride in their season. And this is a game that Braden Smith broke the Big Ten all-time assist record over Cassius Winston. And this is senior night for Purdue. It'll be interesting to see how they respond. This will be the first kind of super meaningful game, I think, since that Michigan State game a couple games ago. And we'll see how the energy looks in this one. It'll be the last time that Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, Trey Kaufman, Wren all play in Mackey Arena. Likely the last time Oscar Clough plays in Mackey Arena as well. But as of today, I still believe that's up in the air, and there's still a possibility he's back. So never say never on that one. We'll officially put the nail in the coffin on that. But on that note, this is a good Wisconsin team. This is a Wisconsin team that has played a lot better post Purdue than pre Purdue. And it's going to be a tough matchup. They played through their two wings, played through Nick Boyd and John Blackwell a lot, but the dark cloud hanging over them is the Nolan Winter injury. Went down with the scary looking ankle injury. I believe is hurt, and it will not be able to play in this Purdue game. So, what do you make of this Wisconsin team? What do you think is going to be different than the first time Purdue saw them? Based on this Nolan Winter injury.
Yeah, so Wisconsin's gotten compared to Purdue last year in terms of how their roster is constructed and what they do. Um, they have two of the best off dribble scoring guards in college basketball in Nick Boyd and John Blackwell, and they have a really really good stretch big in Nolan Winter. Winter being out is a huge advantage for Purdue. They should be able to dominate the front court matchup without Nolan Winter in the game. That's going to be if Wisconsin's not shooting well on the road in Mackey Arena, they're I think going to struggle to offensively rebound and keep Purdue off the offensive glass as well. You mentioned Purdue, dominating Wisconsin. That lead was a lot bigger than the 16 points it ended up finishing at. Purdue got up by a ton when Braden broke the assist record and kind of tried to coast the rest of the way. And Wisconsin was a little too good for that. Got the lead to like 11 before Purdue closed it out.
By
But
the way,
also,
I have an update on the Nolan Winter injury from Christian Borman at Badger Backer. Sounds like post game update. Greg Gard said they avoided the worst and he's day to day. But there is still a decent chance he sits for the Purdue game to prep for the postseason. So,
so that is good news for both Purdue and Wisconsin,
yeah,
I'll
I would
say.
agree.
Purdue's still not going to face Nolan Winter, which would be a pretty big advantage for Purdue. He's Wisconsin's third best player and a big reason why they're so dominant on the glass. And then for Wisconsin, you don't need this Purdue win. Obviously, you'd like to have it. Would help with your Big Ten tournament seeds and also be feather in your cap for seeding purposes, a revenge game from earlier in the season. But Wisconsin's going to be a 6 seed most likely. They just need to hopefully get Nolan Winter healthy so they can win their first round matchup and have a shot whatever 3 they play, which could be Purdue. Who knows? But back to what I was saying earlier, Nick Boyd was incredible in that first game against Purdue. John Blackwell was abysmal, and that's kind of been the story of Wisconsin's season in their losses. Usually they only get one good performance of the two of those guys, and the rest of the roster really isn't strong enough to withstand that. When both of them are playing at their best, this team beat Michigan and Illinois on the road. So just to put that in perspective for Purdue fans who lost to both those teams at home, that's how good Wisconsin is when they're firing on all cylinders. So it's going to be tough for Wisconsin to hang with Purdue on the glass without Winter. This is one of the best rebounding teams in the country, but Winter is a really, really big part of that. But I mean, Blackwell and Boyd, if they're on their best, anything can happen.
Yeah, I mean, Nolan Winter is definitely the key piece. He's by far their best defensive rebounder, and arguably, he's one of their best offensive rebounders. He's 0.2% worse on the offensive glass than Bielauskas is. I think without with Nolan Winter, this team probably goes with Austin Rapp and Alexis Bielauskas in the front court together. I think the major thing that they'll be missing from Nolan Winter isn't so much the necessarily just on the glass, but also the rim protection aspect of things. He's really their only rim protector as well. And that could be big for a game that I think is going to see a lot of Trey Kaufman-Renn. He's been the guy for Purdue recently. And if Trey Kaufman-Renn can have a lot of success at the rim, I think this Purdue team feels really good about where they are. And, I think with CJ Cox being on the roster and being what he's been recently, you feel pretty good about being able to take out one of Blackwell or Boyd from a lot of what they do defensively or offensively with CJ Cox on the defensive end.
Yeah, when Purdue played this team the first time, CJ Cox spent most of his time on Blackwell,
I think it was a
which
big reason why Blackwell was so quiet was CJ in that game.
agreed. But there's only one CJ Cox, and there's two of John Blackwell and Nick Boyd. I'd expect Purdue to stick with that strategy to say let's take Blackwell out of it. I think he's a better matchup for CJ as well, so that will play into it. Um, I think with Boyd, you send an extra guy to him when he inevitably beats whoever else is guarding him off the dribble, and you hope that he can't beat you by himself, which he was not able to the first time. And without Nolan Winter to kind of pick up the slack, I mean, he had 18 and 10 with 2 blocks and a steal in the first matchup against Purdue. Like, he was awesome too. And Wisconsin lost by 16. Without him in there, like, you mentioned the rim protection, the rebounding. Winter is also an excellent stretch big, but they don't really have. Oscar can shoot it. He's not the same threat Winter is. And just scoring in general. Like Winter is an excellent scorer at the 5, and uh, I don't think his absence can really be overstated. It's what turns this game from like Purdue should have the advantage to Purdue should have a sizable advantage in this game, unless Purdue just can't stop Blackwell and Boyd, which, as they saw against Ohio State, this Purdue team is certainly capable of pulling those kinds of performances.
Yeah, I think the last thing to note is Bielauskas and Rapp have been able to stretch the floor at times for this Wisconsin team. You mentioned that Michigan road win. A big part of that was, I believe,
It's true.
Bielauskas hit like 7 threes in that game or something like that. And so, I mean, obviously that's a possibility. And this Purdue team has shown a severe vulnerability to bigs who are able to shoot and drag Clough and Trey Kaufman run out to the perimeter. So it'll be important for Purdue to keep those guys kind of from going nuclear from 3 and in containing the ball, I think, because if you're able to contain the ball pressure that Wisconsin creates, it's going to be a long day for Wisconsin without Nolan Winter. So on that note, I think it moves us into predictions. Purdue is favored to win on KenPom 83-75. That's an 8-point win over 67 possessions. Senior night in Mackey Arena with the chance to become, I believe, the winningest class in Big Ten history. How do you think this game goes? Do you think Purdue covers the 8 points?
You mentioned Velasquez. He had 5 threes in that Michigan win, 5 for 10. He is shooting 31.7% from 3 on the season. I just pulled this up on 2 attempts per game. So not as prolific as Winter, but certainly like he has the ability to go off, and that's something that Purdue has struggled with. So 83-75 win for Purdue is the KenPom spread. I'm gonna take Wisconsin to cover that, even without Nolan Winter, and even on the road in Mackey. This Purdue team hasn't exactly been at their best at home this season. It's certainly possible Wisconsin's a better team than they've faced in Ohio State in Northwestern recently, where we criticized the effort. It is senior night, last game in Mackey. There is a chance they just really come out and give it their all. I don't really see that happening. I think attitude wise, this game is going to look frustratingly similar to the last two. Without Nolan Winter, though, I don't think Wisconsin has enough to beat Purdue unless Purdue is just extremely lazy offensively, because they should really be able to carve up this Wisconsin defense. And as long as CJ Cox is able to slow down whoever his matchup is while he's on the floor enough, Purdue should be able to outpace Wisconsin. But I don't think this is a runaway. I don't think this gets to 10. I'll say some free throws, extend it late, a little bit like they did against Northwestern. Give me Purdue 76-72.
I like that. I think with Nolan Winter, that's that would be how I see this game going. However, I think without Winter, this Purdue team just has too much inside. I think Purdue's going to kill this Wisconsin team on the glass. Bielauskas and Rapp just aren't the rebounders that Nolan Winter is, and I think without that, this Purdue team that probably plays Oscar Clough and Trey Kaufman ran both 30 plus minutes together has a lot of success on the glass. And senior night, I think this team comes out buzzing. I think this Purdue team is able to keep this Wisconsin team at an arm's length. It's not an A plus Purdue performance, but like an A minus Purdue performance. I think Purdue wins this game 86-74, covers the 8 points on KenPom, gets it up to 12, and we have a pretty good and happy and good vibes senior day, which I think would be well needed for this group.